In this episode, one compare the Certified Information Systems Security Professional to other common certification paths, using clear differences that help you sort options without getting lost in marketing language. The point is not to crown one credential as universally better, because the best choice depends on what kind of security work you are trying to do and what kind of environment you are trying to do it in. When you hear people debate credentials, they often talk past each other because they are comparing different kinds of signals, like hands-on technical depth versus program-level breadth. I want you to walk away with a clean mental model for how these paths differ, so you can explain your own direction with confidence and pick a target that fits your responsibilities. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to the CISS books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyberauthor.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A lot of certifications are designed to go deep into tools, platforms, or techniques, and the depth can be extremely valuable when your job depends on daily execution. In those tracks, the learning tends to revolve around concrete mechanisms, repeatable procedures, and detailed troubleshooting patterns, which makes you stronger at producing outcomes inside a specific technology stack. You often see this with credentials that emphasize offensive security techniques, incident response tooling, cloud configuration, or platform administration, where the exam objectives are tightly connected to real operational tasks. The upside is that deep focus can translate quickly into competence on a team that needs immediate technical results, especially when timelines are short and expectations are practical. The trade-off is that depth is usually purchased with narrower coverage, so you may need additional learning later to connect that deep skill to governance, risk, and organizational decision-making. The Certified Information Systems Security Professional, by contrast, emphasizes breadth across security functions and governance concerns, and that changes the shape of what you are learning. You spend more time on why security decisions get made, how trade-offs are evaluated, and how controls fit together across a program than you do on the most detailed configuration of any one product. That does not mean the material is theoretical, because the breadth is anchored to real security outcomes like confidentiality, integrity, availability, and accountability, and it expects you to understand how those outcomes are achieved across different contexts. Where tool-focused tracks may ask you to recognize a command, a setting, or a technique, this program is more likely to ask you to reason through a scenario where multiple constraints exist at once. The strength of that approach is that it supports people who must coordinate across teams and explain security decisions in terms leaders can act on. Specialist paths often center on building, testing, or operating specific systems, and that focus tends to create a distinct professional identity. A builder-focused specialist may live in infrastructure, cloud platforms, or application engineering, where success is measured by whether secure designs and secure defaults get shipped reliably. A testing-focused specialist may live in assessment, penetration testing, or vulnerability research, where success is measured by discovering weaknesses, proving impact, and helping teams close the right gaps quickly. An operations-focused specialist may live in security operations centers, incident response, or digital forensics, where success is measured by detection quality, response speed, and recovery discipline under pressure. In all those cases, the work is tied to particular technical environments, and the credential serves as a shorthand for competence in that environment's methods and tools. Generalist paths tend to center on integrating controls across the organization, and the core skill is synthesis rather than a single technical specialty. Integration means you understand how policy becomes requirements, how requirements become control designs, and how designs become operational processes that can be measured and improved. It also means you can spot when security is being treated as a patchwork of point solutions rather than a cohesive system, and you can bring structure to that mess without needing to be the best technician in every domain. When an organization has many teams, many systems, and many competing priorities, integration becomes the work that keeps security from collapsing into inconsistent decisions and duplicated effort. That is why generalist learning spends time on governance, risk management, architecture thinking, and operational maturity, because those are the levers that coordinate complex environments. The challenge is that generalist competence is harder to prove with a single lab exercise, so the credential signal matters more in how it is interpreted. Credentials also tend to signal role direction, and hiring managers often read them as indicators of whether you are leaning towards specialist, architect, manager, or leader. A specialist-leaning credential often suggests you want to be hands-on in a defined area, producing technical work products, investigations, or implementations. An architect-leaning signal suggests you want to design systems and controls, coordinate requirements, and make long-range trade-offs that shape risk and resilience. A manager or leader-leaning signal suggests you will own outcomes through teams, budgets, governance processes, and decision frameworks, which requires communication and accountability as much as technical judgment. None of these directions is inherently superior because organizations need all of them, but the day-to-day work feels very different in each lane. The mistake is assuming the letters themselves guarantee readiness, when what really matters is whether the credential aligns with the responsibilities you are expected to carry. Role expectations also differ by environment, and that is one of the most overlooked reasons that the best certification varies from person to person. In a regulated environment, the organization often needs strong governance, audit readiness, evidence discipline, and consistent control operation because external oversight is part of the operating model. In a fast-moving environment, the organization often needs security that can keep pace with rapid delivery, frequent change, and evolving architecture, which puts pressure on automation, secure design patterns, and practical risk acceptance decisions. Some environments are hybrid, where the company moves quickly in product development but still carries strict regulatory obligations in specific data flows or business units. When you understand the environment, you can predict whether your value will be judged more on technical execution, program integration, or leadership of trade-offs. That context should guide your choice because it shapes what success looks like after the exam is over. Hiring teams interpret credentials through job needs and risk priorities, and the same credential can be praised in one hiring conversation and dismissed in another for reasons that are not personal. A team that needs someone to immediately harden a cloud environment may interpret a broad program credential as helpful but not sufficient because they need depth that reduces onboarding time. A team that needs someone to coordinate risk decisions and design consistent controls across many business units may interpret deep tool credentials as impressive but too narrow because they need someone who can translate across domains and drive alignment. Risk priorities also change interpretation because a company that recently suffered outages may value resilience and operations maturity, while a company facing regulatory scrutiny may value governance and evidence discipline. The credential is a signal, but it is filtered through the team's pain points and the organization's current threat and risk posture. Your job is to make that signal ambiguous by matching it to the responsibilities the role actually carries. Time commitment varies widely based on scope and prior experience, and this is a practical point that too many people ignore until they are already exhausted. A narrow credential that focuses on one platform or one technique can be prepared for faster if you already work in that environment daily, because your learning is mostly structured review and gap filling. A broader credential can require more time because you are not just memorizing details. You are building a connected framework across domains you may not touch every week. Prior experience matters because familiarity with governance, architecture, operations, and risk language can shorten the ramp dramatically, while gaps in those areas can make even straightforward concepts feel abstract at first. The important thing is to treat time as part of your decision, not as an afterthought, because a mismatch between scope and available study capacity can derail progress. A well-chosen path respects both your ambition and your calendar. There is also content overlap among many security credentials, but overlap does not mean the learning experience is the same because emphasis differs in depth and context. You may see similar concepts like access control, encryption, vulnerability management, logging, or incident response across multiple exams, but one program might treat them as operational mechanics, while another treats them as governance requirements and risk trade-offs. Overlap can be helpful because it reinforces fundamentals, and it can reduce total effort if you sequence certifications intelligently over a career. At the same time, overlap can create false confidence if you assume that knowing one version of a topic automatically means you can reason through it in a different framing. A tool-centric exam may reward precision in implementation details, while a breadth-oriented exam may reward judgment about where a control fits and how it affects business outcomes. Recognizing the difference in emphasis keeps you from being surprised by what the questions are really asking. Some credentials map tightly to one domain, like cloud, testing, or incident response, and that tight mapping can be exactly what you need when your job scope is narrow and deep. If your day-to-day work is primarily cloud security engineering, a cloud-focused credential can align closely with the systems you touch, the threats you see, and the decisions you must make under real deadlines. If your role is primarily assessment and testing, a testing-focused credential can build the mindset and techniques that produce credible findings, useful reports, and meaningful remediation conversations. If your role is primarily response and operations, an operations-focused credential can sharpen your ability to detect, triage, contain, and recover, while improving how you learn from incidents over time. Tight mapping also helps hiring teams, because the signal is easier to interpret when the credential's scope matches the job description closely. The limitation is that tight mapping may not prepare you for broader leadership or cross-domain coordination without additional learning. The Certified Information Systems Security Professional maps across domains, and that cross-domain coverage supports cross-team communication and planning in a way that many narrower credentials do not prioritize. When you can speak about governance and risk in the same breath as architecture and operations, you are better positioned to connect decisions that are otherwise made in isolation. That matters because security is often a coordination problem as much as a technical problem, especially when teams are distributed and systems are interdependent. Cross-domain mapping also helps you anticipate second-order effects, like how an identity change affects audit requirements, or how a network segmentation decision affects incident response visibility. Planning improves when you can align control objectives, technical designs, and operational processes into a coherent program that people can actually run. In many organizations, that ability to translate and integrate is the difference between security that looks good on paper and security that holds up under stress. Credential value ultimately depends on responsibilities, not the letters themselves, and this is where I want you to be honest about what you are being asked to deliver. If you are responsible for hands-on implementation, you will be judged on whether systems are secured correctly and efficiently, and your credential should reinforce the skills that produce those outcomes. If you are responsible for designing control strategies, you will be judged on whether designs reduce exposure and support the business, and your credential should reinforce architectural judgment and risk reasoning. If you are responsible for managing or leading a program, you will be judged on whether decisions are consistent, explainable, compliant where required, and aligned to organizational priorities, and your credential should reinforce governance and communication competence. Letters can open doors, but they do not carry the work for you, and people notice quickly when a credential does not match your actual performance. The best strategy is to select credentials that reinforce what you truly do or what you are realistically moving toward next. To close, the right option is the one that matches scope, depth, and role demands, and that match should be deliberate rather than accidental. Scope is about how wide the job's responsibility boundary is. Depth is about how detailed your daily technical decisions must be. And role demands are about whether you are expected to execute, design, integrate, or lead. If you choose a deep specialist credential when you really need breadth and integration, you may feel confident in one area while still struggling to connect decisions across teams. If you choose a broad credential when you really need immediate technical depth, you may understand the program view while still needing time to build hands-on credibility in the tools your team relies on. When you align credential choice to the work you are responsible for, you reduce wasted effort and increase the chance that what you study becomes usable judgment. That alignment is what turns certification from a badge into a practical advantage. Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.